Hi guys, we're going to continue reading Hank Zipzer, the world's greatest underachiever. Before we go to chapter 5, we're going to review what happened in chapters 3 and 4. Hank's friend Frankie, when he realized that the party was on the same Saturday, which would be this Saturday, as the mutant movie marathon, he didn't want to miss the movie marathon, so he said he wouldn't go. So Hank convinced him that if they bring a blank VCR tape, they'll bring it to his aunt's house, and they have a huge TV system that they can tape the movie there, and then they can watch it on the big screen after the party. Frankie, Ashley's, and Robert's parents all said that they could attend the party. And then when Hank told his parents, his mother told him that they weren't going to the party because Hank had too much homework to do. So, and also his sister Emily was upset because she said that no one could watch her pet iguana, and he couldn't take the car ride because the iguana got car sick. So the compromise was that Hank said that he would do his homework at his aunt's house, and that Emily was going to call the pet store to see how much it would cost for the iguana to be watched overnight, and that they were going to ask their neighbor to watch their dog. What Hank left out is that he didn't tell his mother that he already promised Frankie that they would watch the movie that night, and it's a marathon, so it's movie after movie after movie. So when would he do his homework? So that's the dilemma. Okay, chapter 5. The twins' party started at 12:30. My dad told us we should be on the road Saturday morning by 7:30, 8 o'clock the latest. It's only about a 3-hour drive to West Hampton, but he always builds in lost time. That's a time when my dad is convinced it's a right turn, and my mom says, "Stanley, please just this once, turn left," and he doesn't, and we get totally lost. My dad had rented a minivan for the trip, and when he left to pick it up, he told us to be waiting outside the apartment building at 8 o'clock sharp, so they're already a half hour behind. I had called Frankie and Ashley and told them we were all meeting downstairs. Dad would drive by and get us, and we'd drop off Catherine at Pet for You and me, and then we would be on our way. But when it was time to leave the apartment, we couldn't find Catherine anywhere. She wasn't asleep in her cage. She wasn't in the bathtub where she likes to hang out. She wasn't under the dining room table, sniffing for table scraps. "This isn't like Catherine," Emily said. "She's never late." "That's because she never goes anywhere," I pointed out. My dad was not happy when he had to leave the minivan on the street for over an hour while we searched for the apartment for Catherine. So that means it's 9 o'clock and they're an hour and a half behind now. I couldn't believe that all 4 people in my family, plus Frankie and Ashley and Robert, were crawling around on our hands and knees looking for that scaly beast. Remember, she's an iguana. "Where could she be?" I said to my mom. "We've looked everywhere." "You've got to think like an iguana," Emily said. "Put yourself in Catherine's shoes." "Okay," I said. I feel myself in 4 little tiny baby Nikes, size 1, extra wide. Ouch! They're hurting my claws. Frankie and Ashley cracked up. "Hey guys, I found her," called Robert from the other side of the room. He was crouched over the potted palm trees next to our front door. Sure enough, there was Catherine, her nasty little face poking out from behind the palm leaves. "Catherine," Emily cried, "come to Mama." She reached into the tree to pick her up, and Catherine hissed at her like she was a rattlesnake with gas. Lots of gas. "What's the matter, sweetie pie?" Emily said in her baby reptile voice. "I'm sure she's stressed," Robert said. "She's had a very terrifying experience." Means very scary. Emily looked at Robert and grabbed your stomach because this is disgusting. She got all gooey-eyed. "What a nice thing to say, Robert," she said. still in her baby reptile voice. I didn't know you cared so much about iguana's moods. Actually, said Robert, I'm fond of the whole reptile kingdom, including the bullfrog, the Gila monster, the gecko. Could you just barf? Thank goodness my dad got down to business and cut this icky conversation short. Emily, get a box for Catherine. Let's hurry, everyone. We're going to be late for the party. We gathered Catherine and all of our stuff and piled into the elevator. The minivan was parked outside, and luckily for us, we didn't get a parking ticket, even though my father had double parked. As soon as she saw the car, Emily yelled out, "Shotgun!" That means she gets to ride in the passenger side. "Not in this lifetime," I said. I turned to my mother, who was loading our stuff in the back. "Mom, tell her she is not old enough. Plus, we have guests." "Absolutely, and I'm one of them," said Robert, "so I call shot." I didn't even let him finish the word. "Forget it, Robert. We had a deal, remember? You're next to Lizard Girl, way in the back." It took some wrestling, but I got Emily to move into the back seat by the window on the driver's side. Robert climbed in next to her. That still left one seat in the back next to two geekoids. "I can't sit there," Ashley said. "I get car sick." "I do too," I said. "No, you don't," my mom called out from the back. "Well, I would if I had to sit next to them," I said. Frankie took a deep breath. "Okay," he said. "I'm going in. If I don't survive this trip, give my signed Yankees baseball to my brother." That's what you call true friendship, Frankie, and I get along almost all the time because, well, we'll do anything for each other. The only thing we ever fight about is that Frankie is a Yankees fan, and I love the Mets. We've been able to stay best friends in spite of that. Frankie climbed into the back seat next to Robert and wedged himself as close as he could to the window. 1 inch farther, and he would have been sitting outside the car on the curb. He drew a line with his fingernail along the upholstery. "Robert," he said, "if you cross this line, there will be consequences. Large ones and small ones." "Can you give me an example, please?" This is why Robert drives him crazy, asked Robert. Frankie reached over and gave Robert a noogie on the head. Not too hard, just enough to make his point. Robert squealed like a kitten. "And that's a small consequence," Frankie said. Ashley and I slid in the middle bench, and my mom, without even calling it, got shotgun, as she should. I tell you, adults haven't made. We drove down 78th Street, which is our block, past Mr. Kim's grocery store. He was outside using his green garden hose to put fresh water in the buckets of roses. We passed our school, PS 87. It was closed up tight, which is the way I like it best. When we reached Columbus Avenue, we stopped at the pet store and dropped Catherine off. George was waiting outside, and he was so happy to see her. Mr. Furry and Miss Scaly. Sounds like they live in the city. Yep, we drove through Central Park. Lots of people were out walking their dogs. I saw a dachshund that looked like Cheerio, except he was dressed in a plaid overcoat with 4 little red boots. Once on Halloween, we put a sailor hat on Cheerio. He didn't like that and started doing his spinning thing. That time, he spun around so fast that the sailor hat flew off his head and landed directly on top of my dad's head. It was amazing. If I knew the number, I would have called Ripley's Believe It or Not. From that day on, we realized that Cheerio was a dog who will not wear people clothes. I give him credit for that. As we headed to the Triborough Bridge, which takes you out of town, I turned and looked back at the skyline of Manhattan. Whenever I look at the skyscrapers poking their tops out into the clouds, I always feel proud of New York, and that it is my city, and lucky that I get to live in such an exciting place. Smart boy. We settled in for the ride to West Hampton. My mom, who is working on inventing healthy snack foods for the 21st century, offered everyone a taste of her new salt-free, wheat-free, taste-free soy pretzel snack that she stuffed with rice cheese. Ugh. We all said we were really full. When the city was no longer in view, my mom turned in her seat and said the dreaded words, "Let's sing some travel songs." She does this on every car trip we take. She has a list in her head of really horrible songs. One that are both long and bad, like "Found a Peanut," "My Darling Clementine," and of course, the always awful "Row, row, row your boat." "That sounds like fun," said Robert, and Emily agreed. "What is wrong with them? Don't they know the difference between fun and not fun?" "No singing," I begged. The last thing I wanted to hear was Robert belting out "Row, row, row your boat" in his nasal little twang. "Then how about a game?" my mom suggested. "Great idea," said Robert. "Why don't we drill each other on multiplication tables?" "Why don't I drill you through the back seat?" whispered Frankie. "I've got it," Emily said. Let's shout out amazing iguana facts. Can you believe that this girl and I come from the same mother and father? That means they're very different. Iguanas are born with 80 teeth, but by the time they get to be Mr. Zipzer's age, they have 120 teeth, Robert said without missing a beat. That means they have 40 more teeth. "Robert," Emily said, "that is fascinating." I turned around and stared at Emily. I have shared a house with this girl since the day she was born, but I have never heard that voice come from her. It sounded so sweet, like maple syrup covering a buckwheat pancake. "Furthermore," Robert went on, staring straight at Emily, "did you know that 2/3 of iguana's length is in its tail?" Emily cracked up. "Yes," she giggled. "And when attacked, the iguana can break off its own tail." That's pretty cool. "After which it actually grows a new tail," added Robert. Robert and Emily gave each other a high five. They were in nerd heaven. I glanced at Ashley and Frankie, and their eyes were rolling into the back of their heads. "Can we turn the radio on now?" I begged my mom. I don't even care if it's your oldie station. Anything to cover up the iguana fest that was going on in the back seat. It was after 12:30 when we finally reached West Hampton. We made pretty good time. We drove through some woods into a pretty little town. Past the town was a clump of houses, all painted pink, blue, and yellow. They were new and low to the ground, not like skyscrapers in Manhattan. Even though they were a few blocks away from the ocean, you could still see the sand underneath the lawns and in between the houses and on the sides of the streets. That's my kind of neighborhood. I recognized my Uncle Gary and Aunt Maxine's house because my aunt had tied a bunch of happy birthday balloons around the shiny copper mailbox. We pulled into the driveway. Zach and Jake came running out to greet us, wearing red boots and capes. They're here, they shouted. And when I say shouted, I mean shouted. Those little guys had some powerful lungs. "Hank," they said, jumping up on me and spraying spit into my face. "Hank, did you bring us a present?" Typical 3-year-olds. Papa Pete came running out to say hello, even though he's going to be 68 next June 26th. He's in really good shape, with his bushy mustache and strong hairy arms. He looks like a grizzly bear in a red sweatsuit. "How are all my grandkids?" Papa Pete said. Ashley and Frankie and Robert aren't really related to him, but Papa Pete likes to call us all his grandkids anyway. Very sweet. He gave me a big pinch on the cheek. "I love this cheek and everything that's attached to it," he said. He pinched Ashley and Frankie too, but when he went for Robert's, his fingers just slid right off. "I've got to introduce you to pastrami sandwiches," he said to Robert. "Put a little meat on those bones," which means they're all too skinny, according to Papa Pete. For his whole life, Papa Pete ran the Crunchy Pickle, the deli that my mom took over. Like I told you, my mom is trying to change it into a healthy deli that serves soy salami and vegetarian bologna and other taste-free treats. But when Papa Pete was making the sandwiches, people said they were the best in town. Who are you? Zach said to Frankie, pointing a chocolate-covered finger right up at Frankie's face. I'm Frankie, little dude. Nice to meet you. What's so nice about it? Zach said. Ashley stepped up to help. Nice to meet you is something you say when you meet a new friend, she explained to Zach. It's good manners. I don't have good manners, Zach said. Me either, Jake said. They were pretty obvious, so I thought maybe I should change the subject. Hey, are you guys ready for a great magic show? I said, giving them my best smile, the one where I show my top and bottom teeth. I hate magic, said Jake. Yeah, me too, screamed Zach. It stinks, said Jake. Yeah, stinks, said Zach. Zach gave me a swift kick in the leg. Jake bit me on the hand. Sounds like 3-year-olds. That was my first clue that it was going to be a very long afternoon. Okay, so with some trials, they did get to Long Island. And now they've seen the grandparent, the grandfather, the twins, and the twins are not so excited. Let's see. Chapter 6, My Aunt Maxine. My Aunt Maxine came running outside and threw her arms around my mom. She was my mother's younger sister. They both have curly blonde hair that flies off in all directions. But at that moment, Aunt Maxine looked like she had stuck her finger in an electric socket. Her hair was standing straight up, and her eyes were popping out of her head. I thought you'd never get here, she said. Give me a kiss on the head. Oh, giving me a kiss on the head, sorry. I'm sorry we're so late, Max, my mom said. We had a reptile problem. Who doesn't, my aunt asked. I don't think she even heard what my mom said. Otherwise, she would have said something like, what happened? Did spotted frogs invade your dining room? You don't just ignore it when someone says they had reptile problems. Aunt Maxine, I'd like to introduce you to Magic 3, I said, pointing to Ashley and Frankie. Plus one, I added, when Robert stuck his face in front of her. There's no extra charge for him. Come inside quickly, Aunt Maxine said. We need entertainment. The kids are going crazy. How many are in there? Frankie asked nervously. 17. But it feels like 109, Aunt Maxine answered. They got into the M&Ms, the entire jumbo bag, and they're pretty sugared up, which means they're hyper and they're moving all over the place. And it also says that Hank's family is very late. Maybe we should raise our fee, Ashley whispered. It's my family, I whispered back. We can't ask for more. We weren't even inside the front door when we were pelted with M&Ms. Most of the kids were hiding behind the couches and chairs. Their parents were in the backyard sipping coffee and trying to ignore the candy chucking that was going on inside. A blue M&M hit me right in the forehead. Hey, you could put an eye out doing that, I said. I couldn't believe my own voice. That was something my mom said all the time. And here I was saying those same very words. I was turning into my mom. Kids, kids, Papa Pete called out. Candy goes in your face, not on it. Cousin Hank and his friends have come all the way here to put on a magic show for you, said Aunt Maxine. Won't that be fun? The answer came in a hailstorm of M&Ms. Papa Pete whispered to us, I think you better start the show right away. The audience is restless. Okay, I said. Not so fast, Zip, said Frankie, grabbing my arm. You better find the VCR first. I will, I said. Don't worry about it. Frankie looked at his watch. The mutant moth that ate Toledo starts in 10 minutes, he said. We have to put the tape in before we begin the show. Ashley could hear the nervous tone in Frankie's voice, because remember, that's what they promised him. So he's got two promises. One to Frankie that they're going to watch the movie. One to his mother that they're going to do the homework. Let's see what happens. I'll tell you what, she said. Frankie and I will set up the show, said Hank. You find the VCR, okay, Hank? No problem, I said. I could see Frankie relax. Ashley Wong is a great stress buster. He's right there, she said. I turned to the corner of the room and I saw a guy in a floppy shoes. Oh, I have to go back. I skipped a line. Aunt Maxine. Where's Uncle Gary? I asked. He's right there, she said. I turned to the corner and saw a guy in floppy shoes and a clown wig trying to make balloon animals. His clown lipstick was smeared all over his face. His red clown nose, which was attached by a rubber band, was sitting on his forehead so he could blow into the balloons. He was blowing and blowing until the veins in his neck stuck out. But the balloons would not inflate because they wouldn't get bigger. Hey, Uncle Gary, I said, is it all right if I use your VCR? It's in the den, he said. He didn't sound happy. I ran out to the car, got the blank tape we had brought. When I came back in, the kids were smushing chocolate chip cookies into another's face. Frankie was setting up his magic table in the living room. Ashley was putting up the Magic 3 sign. Robert, who was supposed to be helping, was following Emily around like a pathetic puppy. It means he likes her. I went into the den, closed the door, and looked around for the television. What I saw looked like an electronics department store. There were 5 remote controls on the coffee table, each one of them a different length and had different buttons in different places. On the wall, there was one big television, and there were 3 little ones running down the side of it. But that was just the beginning. There was also a CD player, a DVD, a CD that recorded the DVD, a PlayStation 2, and an empty space next to that, I guess, was just waiting for the PlayStation 3. I looked at all the equipment, and if you had offered me $1 zillion, I couldn't have told you which machine I should put the tape in. The entire cabinet was filled with lights, red ones, green ones, white ones, blinking ones, flashing ones, steady ones, digital numbers changing constantly on the dials, and looked like an instrument panel for a fighter jet, those big planes. I stared at all the lights and the numbers. They were like magnets for my eyes. I couldn't stop looking at them, but I couldn't really see them either. There was one big blur. Come on, Hank, focus. You can't just stand here and look at the pretty light. Frankie's counting on you. You promise, what he's saying to himself. I jumped up and down on one foot, trying to shake my brain into action. The numbers and the lights were all there like they were laughing at me, daring me to read them. I know what to do. I squinched up my face, closed my eyes really tight, then opened them really wide. There, that should do it. Everything will be crystal clear now. I wish. When I opened my eyes, everything looked just like it did before. I walked up to the machines and started poking them to find which one had the flap that would fit for the tape to glide in. I got it on the 3rd machine. Good deal. This wasn't going to be so hard. I was in business. As I slid the tape in, the machine ate it like a cheeseburger. Now, I just had to turn on the TV and tape the movie. Easy. No problem. Uh-oh. Major problem. I flicked on the television and went to channel 48. But it wasn't the same channel 48 that we get at home. In fact, none of their channels were the same as ours. I surfed around and didn't recognize even half the shows that were on. My aunt and uncle must have 500 channels. So here's his problem. He's got to find the show. I opened the door and stepped out into the hall. I thought that if I could find Frankie, he could help me figure out the channel where the movie was playing. Frankie wasn't in the hall, but one of the 3-year-old boys was. I want to see a dinosaur on TV, he said, trying to push his way into the den. I just talked to Mr. Dinosaur, I said, and he told me that all the dinosaurs are napping right now, so you have to come back later when they wake up. But, bye-bye, so long, ta-ta for now. Later, dude, I said, as I slipped back inside the door and waited until I heard his footsteps fade away down the hall. That was actually smart thinking on his part. What now? Breathe. Breathe fast. The clock is ticking. I picked up another remote and studied the front of it. There was a button that said information. That's what I needed. Information. Such as, what channel is the movie on? I pushed the button. Great news! The screen showed a program guide that listed all the programs and what channel they were on. Bad news. The information was rolling by at a pace of only a speed reader could follow. That means really fast. I tried to read the words. I caught some of them. Tennis, cooking, and there it was, the mutant moth that ate Toledo. It came on at the bottom. Next to it was a description of the movie. By the time I got to the column with what channel it was gone, disappeared into the top of the screen. Hey, get out here, Ashley called from down the hall. Your aunt says we have to start the show right now. What channel was it? 36. Right. I'm sure that's what the channel number was that I saw. Uh-oh. You think he should have checked? Think I might have. I got the remote and programmed in 36. I pushed the record now button. The red light came on and I felt a great sense of victory. I was the king of these machines. They had tried to get me, but in the end, they couldn't touch me. I am the machine master. The door flew open and Jake came running in, or maybe it was Zach. I couldn't tell them apart. Why are you in here? He hollered. I'm going to tell my daddy. Your daddy already knows, I said. Come on, let's go do some magic. I hate magic. Yeah, I know, I said. Come on, I'll race you. He's actually very smart. He kicked me and ran out of the room. Oh, right, now I know. It was Zach. Jake bites, Zach kicks. I've got to remember this. Okay, so that is the end of chapter 6.